All right, turning now to last week's revelation of the Trump-era Justice Department's secret subpoenas of lawmakers' personal data, to which House Speaker Nancy Pelosi compared to the Nixon White House.
What the administration did, the Justice Department, the leadership of the former president, goes even beyond Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon had an enemies list. This is about undermining the rule of law. And for this attorneys general, Barr and Sessions, at least two, to say if they didn't know anything about it is beyond belief.
The New York Times reports the Trump Justice Department's collection of data on government officials included then White House counsel Don McGahn. The DOJ subpoenaed Apple in February 2018 for information about an account that belonged to McGahn and barred the company from telling him about it, according to two people briefed on the matter. McGahn was top lawyer for the 2016 Trump presidential campaign before becoming White House counsel and was in contact with many who may have been examined in the probe of Russian election interference. The McGahn disclosure follows the Justice Department's Friday announcement that the agency watchdog would review how officials sought the data of reporters, lawmakers, and others as part of an aggressive crackdown on leaks during the Trump administration. Democrats welcomed the announcement, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants a congressional investigation with the testimony of the former attorneys general. Joining us now, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early, Casey Hunt. Also with us, former Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Daniel Goldman. He served as majority counsel in the impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump and staff counsel to the House managers in the impeachment trial.
So thank you all so much for being with us. Daniel Goldman, we explained last week that spying on journalists was nothing new. The Obama administration did it aggressively against the AP and other news organizations. But you had the Trump administration not only doing that, they were spying on people who were investigating them on Capitol Hill, which certainly sounded remarkable, something that I can't recall any Justice Department doing. And now the news that they were spying even on their own, spying on their White House counsel. Try to put this into perspective for us.
There's a lot of information that's coming at us fast, and a lot of it doesn't seem to make a ton of sense when you look at it all together. In doing my best, I would issue a word of caution before we start using things like spying. I would be highly, highly doubtful that the Justice Department, as part of a leak investigation, was intentionally subpoenaing Don McGahn's phone records. One of the things to think about here is when you get a list of call records for an individual that you're investigating, you need to figure out who they are speaking to. And it could be a scenario where they reached out to Apple or others to determine what numbers were and what one phone number was Don McGahn's. That's one possibility. The House members and staff is a little bit more concerning. The New York Times' most recent reporting indicates that a potential individual of interest was Michael Bahar, who was the former staff director of the House Intelligence Committee. And given that the notifications went out to House members as well as Democratic staff, that would make some sense. And I am highly suspicious as to what the basis is for that kind of investigation of Michael Bahar for leaking, and particularly if it came around the time of Devin Nunes's midnight run to the White House, which you may recall, Joe, caused him to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. So there's a lot more that we need to learn. I think the Inspector General investigation is a good start. But the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland needs to be far more transparent than AG Garland may feel comfortable with, because there are just so many questions right now.
So, Daniel, you're suggesting that what happened to Don McGahn, perhaps he was just caught up in a sweep of somebody else, is the same thing that happened to Michael Flynn back in the fall, winter of 2016, where they were getting the records of and listening to the Russian ambassador. And that's how he got caught up. So you think McGahn might be a secondary target?
I think it's for the Trump administration Justice Department to intentionally target Don McGahn, the White House counsel's phone records. The Flynn matter is a different animal. I mean, he was recorded on a conversation with the Russian ambassador. And then so that obviously revealed his own conduct. We're not talking about content here. We're not talking about recordings. We're not talking about actual emails. And there's just a lot more that we need to know. And that's why I think many are urging the Department of Justice to be far more transparent so that we understand whether this was actually spying or whether this was far less nefarious.
All right, Daniel Goldman, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you being with us. And we are looking forward to getting those answers. And I think Daniel's exactly right. The Attorney General needs to be far more forthcoming than he may be comfortable being, given what's at stake here. Casey Hunt, let's talk about reaction from the Hill. We were talking about this at the end of last week, that the White House, the Trump White House, was actually getting the phone records of people that were investigating the White House. And I had said back in the olden days, back when I was up there on the Hill, you would have seen a bipartisan outcry against the president going after people in Congress. Have we heard any bipartisan complaints here, or has it just been the same predictable Democrats complaining about this overstep?
Well, you know, Joe, I actually think the most interesting dynamic has been, in fact, Democratic frustration with the Biden Justice Department, with Merrick Garland's Justice Department. And I think this is why Daniel Goldman's point is so well taken, because Garland is in there trying to get everyone back onto a set of norms that were essentially abandoned, or at least partly abandoned, under Trump. And he will likely want to go back to not talking about this kind of stuff and following the rules. But Democrats on the Hill are looking at them and saying, hey, you guys have the information now about what was going on here. And there were calls for this investigation. The Justice Department announced the IG investigation on Friday afternoon after hearing some of this. But that was just as Democrats were getting briefed on what happened and told, if you want to find out whether your records were caught up in this, you actually have to call Apple. And then Apple has to use some mysterious mechanism to come up with the records that actually were included in the subpoena. So I actually think there's a lot of frustration among, certainly among Democrats. I mean, your question about Republicans essentially answers itself. You know, I don't want to say that I may have overlooked an email or a note, but suffice to say there has not been a bipartisan outcry over what happened.
Casey, is there a concern among Democrats, Republicans, anybody on the Hill about what those norms are? Merrick Garland's trying to get us back to norms, but one of those norms seems to be this super aggressive to the point of creepy and maybe unconstitutional pursuit of leaks, any kinds of leaks that is, you know, it's not unique to this administration. It wasn't unique to the Trump administration. This has been building from some time through the Obama years. But are there concerns about that norm itself that Merrick Garland may be getting back to? Why do we want him to get back to that?
Well, that's not necessarily what I meant by saying get back to norms. Mm-hmm. I think that what you're pointing to is something that has developed. You're right, over several administrations, frankly, presidents in both parties, and you know we've pointed that out on this show a number of times. And I don't think that there is necessarily, I mean, certainly there are members of Congress like Ron Wyden, for example, leads on this issue quite a bit, who don't think that the way that they do business in this regard is the way that we should be doing things. And, you know, sometimes there is tension between a White House and sometimes members of Congress on this kind of a thing. obviously, White Houses have, generally speaking, been accumulating more power to themselves in a whole host of ways. And this type of leak investigation is one pretty sinister, in some ways, example of them doing that. And some of that comes from Congress giving up its own prerogatives because they're worried about their own political futures. So it's a very, very tricky issue. And I don't think that people who are concerned about the aggressiveness of this leak investigation necessarily want to see some sort of return or increase in that.